Okay, now I'm going to talk about the drug development process a little bit. If you have taken BIOT 100 or BIOT 102 course, you might have seen this chart before. But this is a very important chart because all those companies we talked about so far, the major pharma and CDMOs, they are going through this process. Okay, and then when they go through this process, of course, there is involvement of the regulatory agencies like FDA or like the agencies in different countries. Okay, so understanding this process is really important for your career. Okay, so we talked about the drug discovery process and then drug development and then drug launch. Launch means what? Commercialization of your drug, where you can sell your drug at the market for patient care, right? So those major pharma companies like Eli Lilly, J&J, or Pfizer, whoever, they have a huge R&D division where they'll be testing hundreds of drug candidates. Okay, out of those hundreds of drug candidates, maybe there are some really important drugs that will go through all this process, and then they'll be approved by the FDA, and they can, commercialize, and they can get a lot of money back from that drug molecule, right? But for those companies to be able to go through that process, it takes a long time. How much of time are we talking about? 6.5 years for the discovery step, and then 1.5 to about 3.5 years, and another 3.5 years, about 7 years for what? The clinical trial process. And then once you file the NDA with the FDA, maybe the additional waiting time of 1.5 years, then you get approval, then you can start selling your drug. So overall, it may take about 15 years to get your drug, approved by the FDA. Then after that, you will start selling your drug, but you may have to file your patent along the way some point. And then in the US, the patent is only good for, I think, around like 20 years or so. So you may have only 5 years to get your money back. Okay. So then how much money is involved when you, develop your drug? So discovery are in this stage about $350 million of money involved. And then clinical trials, different phases, okay, 1.5 million, 2 million, 3.5 million. So overall, I'm sorry, those are years. Those are 70 millions, 100 millions, 200 millions dollars, lots of money. And then filing with the FDA, $80 million. So if you combine them all, probably it's billions of dollars that's being invested for your drug development. Okay, so let's take a look at it. So drug discovery, like I told you, there are hundreds of possible drug molecules that may be good for treating human disease, some condition, medical condition, right? So you have that bench science idea with the drug molecule, okay? And once you have that, and if you can do some assay, maybe in vitro assay on the cell lines or cancer cell lines, and those cancer cells are killed with your drug, then once that's done, you have to do some animal studies using probably mammalian model that's close to human. Mostly you will be using mice, a lot of mice, to see if you can replicate that in vitro data in vivo inside of the living system, like a mice. Okay. So that's the discovery side, bench scale operation. It may take about a long time, 6.5 years, and that's where a lot of R&D sciences are involved. Okay, so they are testing for these safety and biological activity using, cell line models or animal models. Okay, typically about 5,000 compounds may be evaluated. Okay. So once you have good data from your animal studies, that's preclinical studies. Mice study showed you good efficacy, good safety, then you can move on to the human study. That's a clinical trial we're talking about, right? So healthy individuals, phase 1, small number of healthy individuals, maybe 20 to 100 people, okay? And then if your drug is tested to be safe, okay, when you add your drug, maybe inject your drug to the healthy individuals, they didn't die on you or they didn't get sick, and that means your drug molecule is safe, right? Then after that, you can move on to phase 2, where you'll be dealing with a lot more volunteers, maybe 100 to 500 people. This time, these are the patients, people with the right medical conditions where your drug will be effective. So you treat those people with your drug to evaluate the efficacy of the drug. Okay. So hopefully you'll have a good statistical, result showing that your drug is effective. Okay, then you can move up to the last clinical trial phase. Actually, if there is another phase, phase 4, but before you get your FDA approval, that's the last phase. So you may deal with about 1,000 to 5,000, patient volunteers. Test the same thing, the efficacy and the safety of your drug for a long time. Okay, so clinical trial phase 1 through 3 may take total about 7 years, and then lots and lots of money. Okay. Through those clinical trials, if your drug was safe and effective, then you can file the NDA, new drug approval, with the FDA. Okay, so of course, before you start your clinical trial, you need to file IND. IND means what? Investigational new drug application with the FDA. That's your way of saying that, yes, I'm going to start the clinical trials with my drug molecule. So FDA will review that clinical trial plan, okay, at that time. So you have about 1 month waiting period, and then you can start your clinical trials. But here, you cannot sell your drug until you get the approval from the FDA. So that approval may come after about a year or year and a half. Okay. So if everything goes well from the preclinical and clinical trials, and then FDA approval, only then you can commercialize and you can sell your drug. So out of maybe 5,000 drug candidate, okay, maybe one could go through all these processes. The success rate is very low. Okay, 1 out of 5,000. Okay, and then out of all those money you spend, okay, the money you can get back, okay, will be, from only single drug. So that's why the drug prices are very high these days, right? And then once you start selling your drug to the market, of course, there's a phase 4 where you have to do the post-market surveillance, meaning, when those customers are injecting your drugs and they may have, consumer complaint, there may be an unforeseen side effect, maybe there's some problem with the drug quality. Okay, they will be filing the complaint with you, and you have to respond to that, and by correcting the quality problem in your drug. So that's the phase 4. Okay, so that's the typical drug development cycle or process that is really, really important for you to be able to understand the operation and the scale of the industry. Okay, and this slide is the same thing, basically, same process showing different scales. Okay, understand where things are being filed. Okay, then I'm going to change the title of our discussion. So we have these two drug products that you can buy over the bench. Okay, one is the Tylenol bottle, and the other one is, who knows what this is? Maybe Natural Medicine International, some kind of herbal medicine. Okay, we call them what? Nutraceuticals. Okay, so between these two, which one would have gone through the previous drug development processes that are, very stringently regulated by the FDA? Okay, so the regulation is different, okay, between the normal pharmaceutical drug product development and the so-called nutraceutical development, because the federal laws are different. Okay, so which of the case is, okay, the important message here is, I want you to look at the label. Okay, the information you can find from this bottle of Tylenol, as well as the information you can find from this bottle of whatever that is. It says Paul. I don't know what that medication, or I don't know if that is even a medication. Okay, so if you look at the label of Tylenol, you'll find a bunch of important information about that drug. But this one, it's very skeptic. I don't know what it is, what information you can get. So that's the importance of the regulation, okay, and the importance of documentation. So I want you to visit this website and take a look at the history of the FDA. For the current FDA agency is to be able to function like the way it is, and throughout the history there have been a lot of malpractices, a lot of troubles, and a lot of people died because of the quality problem of the drugs. Okay, hundreds of years ago, anybody and everybody could sell anything in a bottle, okay, and they can tell that this is a cure-all, it's good for anything, Some people even sold a bottle of mercury for treating maybe pneumonia, things like that. So anyway, it was continuation of malpractices. So that's why the U.S. government needed the FDA agency. Okay, that's why we need the federal regulation, the laws, to make sure that the drugs and medical practices should be rigorously regulated. Okay, it's for the safety and the safety and the efficacy of the drugs and safety of the public, and for that the efficacy of the drug should be tested, right? So that is the kind of prelude to the importance of documentation. And like I told you, the labels found from those two different drugs were so different. Okay, one you can see as not really reliable label, but the other one, generally most information you need should be able to be found there, because they follow the requirements that were set up by the FDA. Okay, so documentation is a system of record, the foundation of quality. Especially this part is very important. It's the foundation of quality. It's the evidence of the quality. Okay, according to the FDA, if it's not written down, there is no quality. There is nothing that's ever been done. There's no evidence, right? So that's why you say documentation is the basic evidence of your work. Okay, so if you look at your textbook, okay, page 92, it shows you a table showing the function of different documentation. So documentation is evidence of your quality, of course, and it can be used in the legal suit, and it can be used in the traceability. So take a look at that. That's very important, maybe on your exam. And then next page, you will see the table 6.2. It'll list the different types of documentation. There may be a documentation called SOP. There's another documentation called maybe batch record. There may be another documentation called lab report. So there are a bunch of different types of documentation that serve different functions. Okay, read over those. They're very important. And then read the example documentation on page 92. Okay, the example is about this. If you're asked to make a solution that's made out of 1 molar sodium chloride. Okay, if you're doing that task under the CGMP condition, how many different documentation will be required for you to fill out before you start making this solution? Okay, what is your guess? There may be a whole bunch of documentation you need to fill out. Okay, so let's talk about those different forms of documentation. Number 1, lab notebook. I told you you will be maintaining and you will be writing a lab notebook out of these 2 courses, right? So on your textbook page 94 through 97, it lists what your lab notebook should look like, what kind of components should be found there, and how you write your lab notebook. Okay, basically your lab notebook is a chronological entry of everything you did in the lab. Okay, so it's the evidence of your work, everyday work in the lab. That's what your lab notebook is. Okay, then how much detail should your writing be? Okay, the rule is, if anyone picks up your lab notebook and by reading your lab notebook, they should be able to replicate your work without asking you any question. That's the level of detail that's required for your lab notebook. Okay, having said that, then how bad is your handwriting? Okay, if your handwriting is so bad no one else can read your writing, then it doesn't qualify. So your writing should be legible, of course. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, understand the format of your lab notebook and the maintain one. We'll revisit your lab notebook during the lab hours, so I'll tell you more detailed requirement about your lab notebook in the lab. Okay, there's another format of documentation. It's called reports. Okay, report is a scientific communication on your work. Okay, so typically report is following a certain scientific writing format. You probably are familiar with that format, right? You have to have your title, and then what? You have to have your abstract. You have to have your introduction, materials and method, and then what? You have to have data, results, discussion. So that scientific writing format is the format of the report. Okay, it's a very concise, professional writing, so everyone could understand what you have done scientifically. That's the report. Okay.